2024 NFL draft rankings from Matt Williamson. How does he see the wide receiver and running back class, plus some sleepers as well? Coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love the everydayers, and we love everyone who subscribes on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Hit that button, subscribe right now. Even pause the podcast. It's okay if you do that. Subscribe so you get this coming into your feed every single day, talking about everything going on in the offseason. Owners meetings is where Matt is. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can tell he's not in his home studio right now. More intel later in the week from there. A little bit of intel today on wide receivers as we speak about the wide receiver class and the running back class this year, Matt. Completely different classes for different reasons. By the way, I want to let everybody know today's episode of Locked On Peacock and Williamson on the Locked On Podcast Network is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Running back class, not as strong as the wide receiver class. I feel like it's almost every year that we're getting crazy strong wide receiver classes, Matt. A really quick note, though, before we get into the wide receivers, because of, some outstanding free agents and potential trades that could be happening in the league will impact where wide receivers are taken in this year's draft class. And San Francisco 49ers GM John Lynch was asked at the owners' meetings, Matt, about his wide receiver, Brandon Ayuk, going into the last year of his contract. There's been reports that there's maybe been some trade conversations happening with teams around the league. John Lynch told reporters that the 49ers are actively talking with Brandon Ayuk, and there has been no trade discussions. All those reports are not accurate, Lynch said. He said the team would be okay with Ayuk playing on the fifth-year option. And, okay, that's interesting, and that's a quote about a player. But how about the player? Let's check in. So immediately after that is reported, you go to Brandon Ayuk's Instagram, and he posted this, $, person shouting, cow, poop emoji, and a walking emoji. So you can translate that how you want. Money talks. You know what walks is what it looks like Brandon Ayuk is saying. So he wants to be paid. He's not saying he wants to be paid somewhere else, but I guess that's a glimpse into how the discussions are going. And I don't know if this is John Lynch putting out the signal saying we haven't talked to anybody about Brandon Ayuk, saying bring me some offers, or is this him saying we don't want to talk to anybody about it? And Brandon Ayuk's under contract and he's coming back, so you can go draft your own wide receiver.
Interesting stuff. I mean, you made a joke before we went on the air. I mean, like, this is a crazy society we live in that 5 emojis turns into a sentence or whatever. And I wouldn't have quite figured it out. And I don't know. I think there's a lot more to be said here. To me, this doesn't seem like anything set in stone,
I find it hard to believe because we put the BS meter and, you cover the Steelers, I cover the 49ers. And
sure,
I find it hard to believe with where the Steelers roster is right now with wide receivers that they haven't done due diligence and just called teams starting caliber wide receivers that could potentially be available. So this is lying season. I'm going to call BS on the report that, and it came out of John Lynch's mouth, that he has not had trade talks because somebody has called and said, what's it take to get Brandon Ayuk? That has happened. And that has to happen, right? And it's probably happened from the Steelers. So that's just what common sense tells me. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But that was just interesting from the owners' meetings, and we throw that out there because obviously the Steelers might be a team that would rather draft a wide receiver or draft a different position in round 1 and go get a wide receiver in free agency or trade another asset for a wide receiver, whether it's T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, anybody else. They brought in Quez Watkins, which doesn't really, I don't think, change anything for what your draft plans are going to be. And there could be a number of wide receivers that are available at pick 20, let's say in the first round, that are valuable pieces and that could be drafted high. And we're doing top fives here plus sleepers. All 5 of your top 5 quarterback or wide receivers could be gone in the first round and potentially even more, right?
Yeah, I think so. And, we're here to talk about, receivers and running backs. 3 receivers are going to go off the board very, very quickly. And I think we know who those are, maybe top 9, top 10 at least. Maybe I would imagine several more in round 1. There could be 8, 10, 12 receivers off the board before the first running back falls. I don't think that's crazy.
There was the Bishop Sankey draft.
Yeah, same deal.
That was the first time that there was not a top 50 running back, I think. He definitely was first round running back that year. Carlos Hyde was the second running back selected, and he was I think he was like the last pick in round 2 or something like that. And Bishop Sankey went a little bit earlier in round 2. That was the worst running back class we've seen from a draft perspective in a while. And this class is probably on par there. And it's the opposite because the best players in this class, maybe, if you take quarterback value out of it, maybe the best players, period, in this draft are wide receiver. And how chalky is your list versus others? Do you have any surprises with the top of your wide receiver rankings as it pertains to the 2024 draft, man?
Not really. I mean, maybe the better conversation is 6 through 10, and I haven't ranked those, but believe it or not, I have Marvin Harrison 1. I have Malik Neighbors 2. I have Rome Odunze 3. And I think that's pretty cut and dry. I'm super impressed with all 3. I do believe all 3 would contend to be first receiver taken most years, especially Neighbors and obviously Harrison. So unbelievably explosive and fast and body control. And Odunze is a massively underrated athlete, but is big and plays big and physical and contested catch and willingness to block and things of that nature. I really am impressed with these 3. Really impressed.
According to draft analysts like, Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah, there are some teams that have Malik Neighbors ahead of Marvin Harrison. Do you think it's really close for you? Is there a tier after Harrison? Is there a tier after Neighbors before Odunze? I think it's pretty clear that you have a tier after Odunze at 3. Is there 3 tiers here in the top 3?
I don't know how to answer that because I'm very confident in my 1, 2, 3. But is the difference from Harrison to Odunze a whole tier or not? I think they're probably all tier 1, but pretty clearly in that order for me. I mean, Harrison's special. I think that's being overlooked in this process. So
for you, Odunze and Neighbors are good enough prospects that, and we talked about this with the potential of the Arizona Cardinals moving out of pick number 4 if a team comes up in the draft. But let's say that team is the New York Giants, and you're okay, Matt, if you're the GM, you're Monty Austin for the Arizona Cardinals, you're getting picks to move down just a couple of spots, and you're guaranteed to still get one of those top 3 guys. Yeah. You don't think that that's it's like a no-brainer move, right? Because you're staying in a similar tier of player. It's not like, oh man, you have to pay up because I can't move off of this one guy, Marvin Harrison, even for one of the other 2 top 3 receivers.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Like, he's unbelievable. In most years, he would be so much better than everybody else in the class. Can't move away from him. But now I think about it, this is extremely true with the running back class, is maybe I don't want to be the team that takes the first one. Would I rather have the 3rd one 8 picks later and have other stuff, I can understand that logic, because and you can get a good receiver on day 2 too. A really good receiver.
I want to pick your brain a little bit about wide receiver 4, which I think is going to be different on certain teams' boards. I think 1 through 3, it shouldn't be a shock to anybody that's those guys, and it's at this point it's kind of it's very much a consensus order with your top 3 wide receivers. But let's poke some holes for a second in those top 3 guys. Let's start first with Marvin Harrison. Do you have any questions about his game, especially not having any workout numbers to sort of just to check those boxes, just to be 100% certain on everything you see on film?
I guess that would be the one thing. And in a way, I remember, because I was there with them, this reminds me of Larry Fitzgerald coming out of Pitt, that he was not great after the catch. Harrison isn't great after the catch like Neighbors is, but he's not bad.
He can give you something after the catch. He's not a 0 after the catch. You know what? It reminds me a little bit of Michael Crabtree, because people thought he was maybe the best player in that draft back in
I remember
2009 draft. And he had an ankle injury or something, and he couldn't work out pre-draft. So he fell a little bit to where he ended up going at pick 9 or 10 or whatever it was. And a lot of people were surprised by that and thought he was, the top 5 lock all day, but he didn't have a chance to work out. But there was a little bit more question about what his speed ultimately was versus someone like Marvin Harrison. As good as Crabtree was in college, I don't think those questions are there. You see it on tape. Maybe he's not a 4.3 guy, but he was on Feldman's freak list too. Like he would have worked out well if he wanted to.
I think he was second on the list. Like he wasn't even like 85th on the list. I mean, he's very freaky, and anyone with eyeballs could see it on tape.
All right, the rest of Matt Williamson's top wide receivers and wide receiver sleeper in the 2024 class, plus running back rankings as well. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Shouldn't be a hassle. Shouldn't have to worry when it's time to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports, music, comedy, theater events, your favorite football team near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You see your seat before you buy. You know exactly what it's going to look like when you arrive at your event. And my favorite part, the all-in prices, show your total up front. None of that hidden stuff that pops up. You know you're getting a great deal before you check out. A couple taps on the app, you buy your tickets. They're right there on the app, so you don't have to go fishing through your email when you do get to your event. And those last-minute deals. Game Time has tickets right up to the start, and even an hour after your event starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You want to poke any holes in Malik Neighbors at 2 or Roma Dunze at 3 before we move on to wide receivers 4 and 5?
No, I think our time's better spent talking about the other guys. I mean, they're not perfect prospects, don't get me wrong, but man, I mean, these guys are remarkable prospects, all 3 of them.
Who is your wide receiver 4 then, Matt, and how close was that battle?
See, this one's in a tier by himself to me. He's clearly 4. There's a gap between 3 and 4. There's a gap between 4 and 5. And this is pretty chalky, too. And that's a Neighbors teammate, Brian Thomas from LSU. I mean, he is a touchdown machine. And I've heard some of his detractors say, I think he's just Valdez-Scantling. I don't see that. I see much more flexibility in and out of his routes. But even if that's your floor as a big, deep threat that just causes, and I'm not a Valdez-Scantling fan. I mean, if that's your floor. I mean, I could see that. But, man, he goes up and gets a football. He's incredibly fast. He's still pretty raw. I mean, there's a major basketball background there, and you can see that. He has a lot of refinement to do. But, man, if he could come in as a 2 and then become a 1, now you're talking.
I get the Valdez-Scantling just from a, height, weight, speed archetype of what kind of X. He's an X receiver. He might not fit for everybody, but if you want this X receiver guy that can win the ball down the field, like that is prototype. He's perfect for it, right? 6'3", 209, blazes 4.3 speed. You see all the speed on tape. He's, red zone weapon with his basketball ability and his athleticism at his size. So it's a really easy evaluation. You know exactly what Brian Thomas Jr. is. And he's probably consensus wide receiver 4 for a reason, but I think he's got a little bit of company and a little bit of a late riser in the process. And your wide receiver 5 is Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell out of Texas, little over 6'2", 205 pounds, also threw down 4.3s. He ran 4.34 out of Texas at the combine. I mean, the Texas boys were flying. Yeah. And Mitchell, how about this? Mitchell is the first wide receiver that is, and actually Brian Thomas Jr. and Adonai Mitchell both hit these metrics. So in the combine era, wide receivers that are over 6'2", that are over 205 pounds and ran 4.3s, I think there's only 3 guys on the list, and it's Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and DK Metcalf.
Yeah, I heard that. Like, that's a rare combination.
Yes. And Adonai Mitchell, unlike DK Metcalf, and Brian Thomas is a little bit more straight line-ish in his ability and how he plays. Adonai Mitchell has some other ability to maybe be a more complete receiver. But there's a ton of boom or bust, I think, with Adonai Mitchell as well, because you see it on tape and then you don't see it on tape. And then sometimes he's good at contested catch. Sometimes he's not. Sometimes you see speed. A lot of times you don't. It looks like he's running 75% a lot of the time, which really weirded me out when I was watching his tape, because you don't always see 4.3 speed. And then you watch 5 games and find like, oh, there it is, but it shouldn't take 5 games to see a guy who's 4.3. You should see it in 5 seconds, right? Sometimes he's really blocking hard and he has the ability to do it. Sometimes not. He doesn't give you a lot after the catch. So interesting prospect. And of these guys, I think more of a boom or bust is Adonai Mitchell. But man, with his ability, I just think he's going to go high.
Frustrating prospect. And I remember you saying a lot of that stuff a week or so ago about there's a lot of routes. It's like, what are you doing? And he's a perfect example of why you don't scout off of highlight tapes, because his highlight tape, it'd be like, do I want Harrison or Mitchell? I mean, it's that good. Yeah. It's rare stuff. Go up and get the ball with a 40-inch vertical and pluck it, moss it over some big defensive back's head, pull it down and run past them. The ability is so tantalizing. I don't know how he's coached. I mean, this is what scouting's so important. What's Texas telling him? I mean, how are they coaching him? Should he run everything the same way? Does he have a terrible wide receiver coach? Does he just not like football that much? I mean, all those questions would need to be answered, and you and I will never know those answers.
That's where the money is made from those scouts.
Yeah.
He's going to put in the work and do the little things, and maybe a really good. I remember Corey Coleman coming out of college. It was like,
great one. Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, he doesn't block. There's plays where he just stands there. He's not in. There's 10 guys involved in the play. He's not one of them. But that's the way he was coached up. But he only ran through.
Don't use your energy. Yeah. Right. We're conserving our energy. We're going to play fast. We're going to snap the ball 90 times. Don't run routes just for cardio.
Right. And it's like, well, he's a freak athlete. We're going to get him in the NFL and we'll coach him up. That's what we're paid to do. Then he gets in the NFL and he can only run 3 routes. And that was it. He didn't have it.
Yeah.
Okay, he was with that. And there's so many things that go into this. And so Adonai Mitchell's the fascinating guy. I can see him being the 4th wide receiver off the board. I could see him falling into the 2nd round. I could see him being a superstar. I could see him being a bust. Like he's the one guy that I think is going to be different on everybody's draft boards.
He's going to be frustrating. Yeah.
I know this is a top 5. And by the way, tell the folks where they can find the written articles of these rankings.
Steelers.com. Yeah, that's called a triple take series. I mean, there's 3 of us that do our top 5 in this format, and it doesn't reflect the Steelers draft needs or anything. It's just the 3 of us making people exposed to these players.
This is not Mike Tomlin's list. This is Matt Williams.
This is not. I didn't run it by him first, right?
Who are the near misses from your top 5 before we go to the sleeper?
Tons of them. I'm really warming up to Troy Franklin. I'm really warming up to Jermaine Burton's really exciting from Alabama. Keon Coleman's a just miss. Xavier Leggett from South Carolina. I mean, this list goes on. And there's maybe 15 to 18 receivers here that I think could be legitimate NFL starter types, if not better.
Who is your sleeper wide receiver on your triple take wide receivers, Matt?
The one I picked was Malik Washington from Virginia. I mean, he's under 5'9", but he's pretty rocked up. He's over 190 pounds. He's got a kind of a wider base to him, thick. I mean, he's well built, really explosive, prototypical slot type guy. 100 or more yards in 10 of his final 11 games at Virginia. He was a transfer, just somebody a ton of people know about.
And a return man as well. So add value on special teams. Yeah, really explosive guy. Yak after the catch, so he'll be a fit for a lot of teams. And while he's short, he's not so undersized because of how strong he is. And he's good after the catch. He can be a really nice fit for a lot of these teams that want to play a quick passing game and want a guy who can make plays after the catch. And obviously, he's got a clear path to being on a roster as a return man as well.
Yeah. He brings a lot to the table. I like him a lot.
Next, let's talk running backs. Who are Matt's top 5 running backs who just missed the list, and sleepers in 2024 next? This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed. And if your bracket's all messed up, it doesn't matter, because it's a new day and it's all fresh for you at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to play with and bet on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And of course, if you don't want to bet on college basketball, that's fine, because you can bet on NFL futures. You can bet on draft props as well. All you got to do is visit fanduel.com/lockedon. Who is your top running back in the 2024 NFL draft, Matt? And where is he going to go off the board? Where's the first running back get drafted this season?
So I think that my expectations are you don't want to be the team that takes the first one, but at some point there's going to be a run on running backs. Maybe it's the end of round 2 into round 3. Maybe it's the middle of round 3 into round 4. But I think once they start dropping, there's 6, 7, 8 that are all about the same tier. And the teams that want one don't want to get shut out, so they'll take the third or fourth one and be just as happy as the first or second. I went with Jonathan Brooks, but I mean, he's carried the ball 238 times. He's coming off a torn ACL. He played behind Roschon Johnson, of course, Bijan Robinson, but he's a very well-rounded player. I think he would be an early second if he was clean medically. So I think his tape is a little better than everybody else's.
It's amazing how there's not a lot of traction for any of these running backs either. There's not teams are really starting to warm up to blank, and he's probably going to be the first receiver off the board. I honestly, I know I'm down on running backs generally and how much resources you put into them, but in a class like this, like at this point, I'd be shocked if one goes in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not at all.
Who's number 2 in your list after Jordan Brooks out of Texas?
Again, this gets foggy. I mean, I went with Marshawn Lloyd narrowly over Trey Benson. Lloyd's a bowling ball type. I mean, he's 220 at 5'9", a lot of explosive traits, good receivers, but sometimes he'll bounce runs more than he should, fumbles a little bit more than he should, but there's a lot of untapped potential there for me.
Trey Benson is your number 3 running back, and he's one of the guys that threw down at the combine. And I actually want to talk about a couple other guys that actually threw down 4 threes at the NFL scouting combine, because if you're not sure, I think the tie goes to, all right, let's take the best athlete. And when you're 6 feet and a quarter, 216 pounds, and you run a 4.39, that's going to get scouts' eyes, right? That's going to get GM's eyes open wide, and that's Trey Benson out of Florida State.
Yeah, and boy, he is powerful, and he has all those traits. He's a little bit of a straight line guy, though, and if you can catch him behind the line of scrimmage, he's not going to be real elusive in those type of situations. Wasn't as much of a workhorse at Florida State as you would think, maybe as he projects to the next level. I like him. I mean, I like him. I just think that if you just see height, weight, speed, you'd be like, oh, that's maybe a first-round pick. I don't quite see that out of him.
You see a lot with this running back class too, is like, oh, a better pro than he was a college player.
Maybe, yeah. I think that's quite possible.
Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, 6'1", 235. We're talking about a big running back here. And by the way, the hip drop tackle, maybe the league is going to lean more towards those big running backs again. I think that is one of the advantages of the non-hip drop tackle. It does help the running game a little bit. You got Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin, number 4.
Yeah, he just turned 20. He has 20 100-yard rushing performances already at that age at Wisconsin. People bounce off him, especially his upper body. He's another big, big back. I think he's a 235 now. I think he played heavier than that at Wisconsin. Once he gets going, he does a lot of damage, but he's not super wiggly. I mean, he's not Jonathan Taylor coming out, out of Wisconsin.
Who's your number 5 running back in the 2024 class?
I had a really hard time leaving Wright from Tennessee off just from an explosion speed standpoint. But I think there's something to be said for what Blake Corum did at Michigan. I mean, he was a leader. He's super tough. He's a little smaller than you like. I mean, he could have came out last year and maybe, gone pretty early, except he tore his meniscus late in the 2022 season. People adore him, which I don't care as much about at running back position, but he has good vision. I think he's a high-quality back, but probably a high-quality number 2 at the next level, which a lot of these guys might be.
Right, and Blake Corum's one of those guys, just a hair under 5'8", but 205. I mean, that's a bowling ball type of a build. And he's, short arms. He showed a lot of vision in college. 4.53, I think, is a good time for him to show that athletically he can be a dude. I do love that his agilities were very nice. 6.82 in the 3-cone, 4.12 in the short shuttle, which were two of the best times at the combine for the agilities and, vision, low to the ground. I think he's a great fit for maybe even Jim Harbaugh, his old coach at Michigan in the NFL. That's a nice little line to draw there for a team that might need a running back in Los Angeles now with the Chargers. And good pick there. And a couple of guys.
He did a bunch of reps on the bench with his short little arms, and just pumping out little short reps over and over. I mean,
and the type of guy who goes day 3 and then becomes a starter in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, someday you will start him on your fantasy team, and that day will come.
Yeah, the question is, how early do you pick him up on your fantasy team? Is the question with Blake Corum. You mentioned Jalen Wright, and I'm glad you did, because I was going to bring him up as someone who got snubbed from your top 5 list. He was one of 2 players that ran faster than Trey Benson at the combine this year, 5'10.5", 210 pounds. He ran 4.38 in the 40, 38-inch vertical, 11.2, which was best amongst running backs in the broad jump. And you see the speed on tape. I've compared him to a player who was in with the 49ers I watched a lot of, who's now in Miami with the Dolphins. And so that wide zone, one cut, big home run hitting type of a running back, Raheem Mostert sort of a mold. I mean, that's exactly that it came to mind instantly when I saw Jalen Wright the first time, was Raheem Mostert. So that type of a player there. And then just real quick, if you want to talk about the combine, Isaac Guerrero went crazy, and he might actually get overdrafted because he doesn't play to this workout number. But 6
Everyone thinks he's Pacheco, and I can take or leave Pacheco, to be honest with you.
And Pacheco's a 7th-round pick, so if you're giving him the 7th round, I'm all about it. But if I have to take him, day 2, then maybe not so much. But Isaac Guerrero went crazy at the combine. 6 feet, 221, 4.33, 41.5-inch vertical, and he had great agilities too. 6.94 and 4.15 in the 3-cone and short shuttles. So made himself some money for sure, but the tape isn't quite there with Guerrero. If I'm looking for a speed guy, I'd definitely take Wright or Benson over him.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there's a lot of these guys who can run pretty fast in a straight line, and I think he's a little bit straight line-ish as well. He looks like a complimentary back. Maybe he's Derrick Henry's sidekick or something like that.
But the thing with, we're talking day 3 running backs.
Mm-hmm.
You start out as a complimentary piece, and who knows? And then you're starting games.
One injury away, and
right. And they're all capable of carrying the football in the NFL. It's not just because it's not a great class. We're just saying there's no top end guys. These guys are going to play in the NFL, and some of them for a long time, probably.
Yeah, this is something we always talk about, like the dynasty community is, okay, maybe these guys aren't stars, but they're going to get on the field and they're going to touch the ball a lot. All those guys we talked about, including Ray Davis and some of these other guys that we haven't discussed. They're going to get on the field and they're going to touch the football.
Who's your favorite sleeper in the class?
I went with a deep sleeper from New Hampshire, Dylan Lobby. He's stereotypical bigger Danny Woodhead type, good receiver. Mm-hmm. But the guy I wanted to talk about a little bit instead was Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. He's a receiver turned running back, and I think he was always miscast as a wide receiver and is starting to really find himself as a running back with those receiver skills, but he will pick up the blitz. I think he's a name to know that might go a little earlier than you think. You might go ahead of a name I mentioned and be like, who's this Tyrone Tracy guy?
Both of those sleeper running backs, by the way, were the 2 best in the short area agilities.
Really?
Just a hair better than Blake Corum, I think, were both guys. Tyrone Tracy had the best 3-cone time at the combine amongst running backs, and the second best short shuttle time. And the kid from New Hampshire that you mentioned had the best shuttle time at 4.02 at the combine.
Okay.
Short area quicks for those guys. Yeah. The prototype, 3rd down change of pace backs.
Yeah, and that's what they are, and those guys usually do well,
That is Matt's top running backs, wide receivers, some sleepers mixed in as well. What do you think? Let us know at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Drop a comment on YouTube. Drop a question as well for our weekly mailbag, and we'll be back tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.